Microsoft Dynamics 365 is one of the most popular ERP systems in the marketplace. It's also one of the most widely recognized names in the marketplace. But is it the right fit for you? That's what I'm going to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And Microsoft Dynamics 365 is one of the ERP systems that we're most familiar with and we help a lot of our clients implement. However, we found that D365 is not the best fit for every organization. There's a lot of strengths and weaknesses of this product, just like any software product out there. So what I wanted to do today is share with you an objective view of the pros and cons of this software based on our experience having helped so many companies throughout the world select and implement the product. Now, if you'd like to learn more about some of our experience with D365, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to discuss some of the strengths and weaknesses with you in more detail beyond this video. But you can also learn about some of our observations and objective and tech-agnostic perspectives on the product. You can find that by reading our Guide to Successful Microsoft D365 Implementations. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. Before I get into the pros and cons of Dynamics 365, let's just provide a general overview of what the product is. First of all, to clarify, when we talk about D365 in this video, we are talking about the finance and operations version of D365. There's two different versions of Dynamics 365. There's Business Central and Finance and Operations. Starting with Business Central, which we'll not talk about here today beyond this, but that is just to realize that Business Central was formerly known as Microsoft Navision. If you remember that product, that was what Navision evolved into, was Microsoft Business Central, which is more the small and mid-market solution for D365 customers. Finance and Operations, on the other hand, originated from Microsoft Exapta, as well as Great Plains and other Microsoft products that they merged into one single product called Microsoft D365 Finance and Operations. And this product is built for larger organizations. So companies that might be considering Oracle Fusion or maybe even SAP S4HANA, those organizations are more likely to consider Microsoft D365 F&O, whereas D365 Business Central is typically more down market, and that competes more with like a NetSuite or perhaps other types of systems in the marketplace. And what we'll discuss in this video is that D365 has a lot of very unique strengths and some disadvantages, and it couldn't be much different than a lot of the leading ERP systems in the marketplace, which could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what it is you're looking for. So what I want to do today is talk about some of those pros and cons as it relates to D365 F&O. One of the biggest advantages of Microsoft D365 is the integration it has with some of the other Microsoft products in its ecosystem. This is a very seamless integration, and other ERP systems in the marketplace, to be clear, do integrate to some degree with the Microsoft ecosystem, but not in the same way that D365 does. For example, organizations that are using Power BI for business intelligence, or perhaps they're using Power Apps to create their own applications and their own semi-customization of technology, those solutions can be great add-ons to D365 because it allows you to extend the capabilities and change the capabilities of what the core out-of-the-box technology can do. In addition, if you're a user of Microsoft Office and SharePoint, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, Excel, all these different Microsoft solutions that you might be using at the individual level, Microsoft D365 integrates very well with those solutions. And of course, if you're using Copilot, Microsoft owns Copilot. It also owns something called Microsoft Agent 365, which is the agentic AI offering from Microsoft. Those solutions integrate really well into D365 as well. And I know for a lot of people at the consumer level, they're using Copilot on a personal basis. So in some cases, that can make it easier for organizations that want to deploy AI, in that employees oftentimes are using Copilot outside the workplace, and it can make it easier for them to adapt to using Copilot in the workplace as well. So one of the biggest strengths is this ability of D365 to not be constrained by what it does out of the box on its own, but its ability to integrate with all these different tools and applications that Microsoft has spent so much time and money investing in and developing over the years. When we compare Microsoft Dynamics 365 to other ERP solutions in the marketplace, we find that it's generally more flexible than a lot of the systems out there, especially when you compare it to something like a SAP S/4HANA or Oracle NetSuite or even a Workday type of product that's SaaS, multi-tenant, and relatively inflexible. Microsoft is very flexible. And the reason for this is because they offer Power Apps for you to create different applications and extensions of the product, but also because they have ISVs or third-party independent solution providers that take the base D365 product and they mold it or conform it or develop it into something specific to a specific industry, or they build a certain capability on it. So in addition to having flexibility with the tool itself, you also have the ability to go find a variation of the tool D365 that best fits your industry or the function, and you can do that through third-party providers that have developed these extensions or these variations of D365. Microsoft also has a low-code, no-code sort of development environment, which makes it easier for semi-techie types to be able to develop variations of the product. But one thing I will say is, despite the fact that the flexibility is a strength, it can also be a weakness. For a lot of organizations, this is actually a liability to be able to do all this different stuff and have all these different variations of a core product, because first of all, it means that it makes it easier to resist change. It's a lot easier to take Microsoft and have it conform to the way you've always done things rather than driving a sort of standardization or a new way of thinking around how your business processes work. Now, you can work around this by ensuring you have the right process governance in place and the overall program governance in place, but generally speaking, just because you can change the software doesn't mean you should. And that's one of the traps that many Microsoft customers fall into. Secondly, and I'll come back to this point in a moment, when you have an ecosystem that's as big as Microsoft's, where you have different third-party providers and ISVs that are developing different variations of the product, it creates a sort of fragmentation where you could be buying the D365 product, but now you're locked into one specific ISV or solution provider because they're the only ones that know how that software works. They built it, they own the IP, and you're dependent on them versus the broader Microsoft community. So that's some of the advantage and disadvantage as it relates to flexibility, but I'd say flexibility is one of the key operative terms in describing Microsoft D365, whether that's for better or for worse for your organization. Now let's talk about user adoption and the impact to your IT department as it relates to Microsoft D365. As it relates to user adoption, it can oftentimes be easier for end users or employees to learn the Microsoft D365 product because it has that Microsoft look and feel. So if you're already a Microsoft shop, you're using Microsoft Office and you're using SharePoint and Copilot, Microsoft Teams, all these different Microsoft apps, it's going to be a bit more natural feeling to your employees in terms of how to use that software, especially if you compare it to something outside the Microsoft ecosystem that looks entirely different, has a completely different user interface. However, it can actually add a bit more pressure to your IT department. So it could make things easier for your end users, but it might make things a bit more difficult or give your IT department more to manage because of some of the other things I've mentioned throughout this video so far. If I change the software, or if I integrate with different applications, or if I use Power Apps to create extensions or customization to the software, or if I go buy a certain variation of D365 from an ISV, that actually puts more pressure on the IT department to manage that technical complexity and risk. It may be that that risk and that cost and that impact to IT is not nearly as important as the positive impact it might have on your end employees, but it is something to be aware of. For many organizations, if you're not already a Microsoft Dynamics shop, you'll have to retool your IT staff to support Microsoft in that relatively complex ecosystem. So end user adoption and impact to IT are two other things you should consider that are both a positive and a negative for Microsoft D365. One of the advantages of Microsoft's ecosystem as it relates to D365 is that there are so many different value-added resellers, independent solution providers, and others supporting the product. You have a lot of different options as it relates to buying and implementing D365. However, this isn't necessarily a good thing. In the case of Microsoft, they've taken a bit of a laissez-faire approach to managing their implementation partner ecosystem when you compare it to, say, Oracle Fusion or SAP S/4HANA or even Oracle NetSuite or some of the other products in the marketplace. D365 has taken a hands-off approach, meaning that there's a lot of variation in the quality of implementation partners out there. It's highly fragmented. There's a lot of small mom and pop shops supporting D365 implementations. And in many cases, you're bound to that independent solution vendor that has developed a certain variation of D365. You might be sort of locked in to that ISV and have limited options because they're the ones that own the IP in the way that version of D365 might have been built for a certain industry or function. So that's something to be aware of, is that highly fragmented implementation partner ecosystem is troubling for many organizations. And you add to the fact that when you compare the D365 ecosystem to other implementation partners of other products like SAP and Oracle Fusion, for example, you find that the Microsoft community tends to be, as a general stereotype, they tend to be more techie focused. They tend to be more focused on the Microsoft tools itself, which is okay, but it leaves a lot of gaps and deficiencies in the way that the product typically gets implemented. Typically, Microsoft partners are not as good at addressing organizational change, program governance, addressing business process improvements, addressing integration with other systems. And most vendors do struggle with this. Most implementation partners with other vendors struggle with this as well, but I'd say it's even more true in the Microsoft Dynamics partner community. So that's something to be aware of as well as you navigate your potential D365 implementation. So this all begs the question of, where is Microsoft D365 the best fit, and is it a best fit for you? Well, first of all, the first criteria that would suggest it might be a good fit for you is if you're already a Microsoft shop. If you're heavily invested in Microsoft Office, if you've invested heavily in a legacy Microsoft ERP system like Navision or Exapta or Great Plains, it may be that D365 is a natural step in your digital journey. Additionally, if you have relatively high technical sophistication internally, you have a relatively robust IT staff that can manage the complexities of a Microsoft ecosystem and a Microsoft offering, then it may be a good fit. If you don't have that, it can be challenging, and it may be that you have to beef up or staff up your IT department to be able to support that environment. If flexibility is important to your organization, it may be that D365 is a great fit for you. If you're trying to drive standardization and a common set of business processes, and you're actually looking for a relative amount of rigidity or consistency across your operations, Microsoft may not be the good fit. You may be better off looking at SAP S/4HANA, Oracle NetSuite, Oracle Fusion, one of the other more standardized solutions in the marketplace. But if you're an organization that changes quickly, it's very flexible as an organization, and you're looking for flexible tools to support you, D365 can be a good fit. And then just building on that flexibility point, to leave you with one more thought as it relates to this, that is, if you are an organization that has pretty unique business operations, or you have a unique secret sauce that not many, if anyone else, has in the marketplace, it may be that D365 is a good fit, not only because the product itself is flexible, but because you also have access to Power Apps and other types of solutions that can extend and build on the capabilities of D365 in a way that's unique to you. So that could be a situation where D365 is a good fit as well. So I hope this has given you an objective overview of the pros and cons of D365, but I'd love to hear from you. If you have experience implementing or working with D365, love to hear your feedback below. Please leave those in the comments, and I'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, if you'd like to learn more about our experience helping clients throughout the world implement D365, you can learn some of our lessons in our guide to successful D365 implementations. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here, or go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful. Hope you have a great day. Dynamics 365 is one of the most common.
One more time, 3 was kind of odd.
Little stutter there. And objective and tech agnostic. When we compare Microsoft Dynamics and agnostic and tech agnostic.
An objective.
Objective.